So at Habitat, I did start at the Restore just as like a little sales clerk. And from a lot of those experiences of even having volunteers come in there and then working all the way up, you just get a whole different array of people that you can touch. So always listen to people on the lower levels. Okay. Number 2 is once you define your mission and before you start recruiting, you need to have a clear understanding of what you need volunteers for, and you need to be clear about what they'll be doing. So it's really great to be like, we're going to have volunteers, and they show up, but you don't know exactly what that process is to get them there or to sign up or anything like that. So it really helps if you know what they're going to be doing and know what you're going to need them for before you have them. I know this sounds really basic, but even especially at like a small affiliate, it was really kind of embarrassing if people would show up there and be like, what are we going to do? And you have 30 to 50 people and you don't know what they're going to do and they're all looking at you. So that was definitely a fun experience to learn. Let's see. Okay. I know this is also really, really small, but it'll come in later with something that I say. So point of contacts for volunteers or donors is a whole part of engagement that you cannot afford to not have. So they need that one person that's an advocate. I was actually talking about this with Brian earlier, is that being a volunteer coordinator or having a point of contact is the only person that they feel that they can talk to or actually get information from. And that's really important because it builds relationships with people, which at the end of the day, yes, people want to spend their money or give you their time, but they're doing it for a lot of other reasons. And one of those is human connection. So you can't afford to just pass them around. And statistically, at Mercy Ships, we have found that like the more that people are passed off in a process, the more likely you are to lose them in that process. And so if you can stick with one person and it's clearly defined what they're doing, and if they do need to be passed off to someone else, you know, keep it very clear throughout the entire thing. So, oh yeah, I wrote, this is really dumb, but communication is a big thing, lacking in all organizations. You want to over communicate. So I wrote consistent communication. So consistent with your mission, consistent with what they're doing, and consistent with the people that are telling them this. And so I wrote CC, like we all CC in people on emails, because we're like, everybody needs to see this and you want to consistently communicate. So that was really dumb, but it's an easy way to remember it. Does anybody have any questions up until this point? I feel like this may be a kind of basic that we can dive into like later, but let me know if you have any questions. So sponsors, no. Okay, then I started to think about how you can really kill two birds with one stone with volunteers and sponsors and recruiting. And so because sometimes it's, once you gain that traction, that whole cycle just keeps going. So one thing that I learned at Habitat is that a lot of places like big banks like Wells Fargo, any place like that that wants to sponsor a home, because they are required by their organization to donate so much money, but also do so many volunteer hours per employee. So, and you can create different sponsorship packets that way, depending on what you're doing, of like, hey, if you donate $10,000, you get this many hours for 20 volunteers. So it's an incentive to donate more, but it's also an incentive to get people out there and just kill two birds with one stone. And, you know, the idea is whenever you're really small is, you know, like you want to have people come out or, you know, come to an event or whatever. And yes, you appreciate their time, but in the end, you either want them to keep coming back as volunteers, but you also want them to turn into donors. And so trying to mesh the two worlds creates a larger audience. And so that's what you want to do. Sorry, I saw someone's question.
And Kylie, you can feel free to keep going if you want.
Okay. I'm like,
yeah, and yeah, I'll pull out questions
okay,
when you
perfect.
take a breath.
Perfect. So with trying to mesh those two worlds of audiences, like I said, it kind of opens up how many people you can talk to and how many people you can get on board with your mission. And so I started thinking of like, well, what type, everybody does, different activities are in different and interested things. So I remember we would host 5Ks, which, people want to sponsor a 5K because they want their logo out there. So they're going to come out there, they're going to participate, people run marathons, what have you. And then you're going to get your volunteers who pay to be in it. And so you're kind of making it more tangible for donors of being like, hey, we're donating money, but we actually get to be a part of something at a lower level. And then with volunteers, it's, oh, that's cool. Like, I didn't know that this person is with this bank that sponsors this, and it kind of just connects the dots for them, which makes it more of a real experience. And that's what you want. And so, like I said, like the marathons were really big with us, but we also started doing kind of like a potluck fundraising of volunteers or donors, whoever was kind of involved, would bring stuff for like a silent auction type of thing, but everyone was involved. So those are kind of fun little ways to like merge the two. So that way you're not spending a lot of your assets on like double marketing, which is something that we do here is, we took a whole website and we made 3 different versions of it for like volunteers, donors, and like alumni, and then corporate. So I guess actually 4. So sometimes it's just easier that way whenever your budget's a little smaller. I am going to, if you don't mind, circle back to James' question just before I move forward. Let me check and see how much time I have. So could you describe the medical services provided from the ship and what type of medical professionals deliver these services? So currently right now, we do a few different types of surgery depending on the country that we are serving in. So like this past year, we served in Senegal, and it's usually August through mid-June. This is Mercy ships. And we remove goiters, cleft palates, women's health, we repair fistulas, we do ophthalmic and dental, and stuff like pediatrics, like their bowed legs and stuff like that. So all different types of professionals and surgeons and nurses. And so those are more of our what we call short-term volunteer opportunities, because we do have to time it out just right, where all of our equipment and stuff for those specific surgeries for X amount of weeks. So they're there for anywhere between 2 and 12 weeks, where someone like a captain is serving 2 to 3 years, or a teacher, we have a school on board because people serve with their families. We are currently, the reason that we serve in West Africa or along the west coast of Africa is because that's where like the bottom billion is of where the attention is most needed, because not only are we providing free surgeries, we're hoping to make a lasting impact. So alongside surgery, we have medical capacity building. So we're training doctors and training students how to practice safe surgery. So right now we're trying to focus on the west coast of Africa, but the hopes are is that we can expand eventually. So right now, we have the one ship, her name is Africa Mercy, and we are building a second ship, which we've never had, to providing surgery at the same time in 2 different countries. And so we're on the cusp of that, 2021, fingers crossed. And yeah, so we're hoping to expand, but we wanted to start at the very, very bottom. So yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. So I just have some more notes where maybe we can discuss them, but I went through each organization and wrote out takeaways that I took from those, and I've applied it to another organization or here. And the first one is that both volunteers and donors, they do want to get their hands dirty. And like I said, combining that world, those worlds really fuel your volunteer and donor system all in one. And once it gets going, you gain more traction and you gain more attention. And the more attention that you have, the more that people want to get involved. And so it became really a habitat of like, we would book months out in advance on homes. Just because we kind of like were able to juggle the two at the same time. One really big takeaway is transparency. And I found this a lot, especially on the recruiting side, is that, you know, people call you and they tell you their concerns, especially with something long-term that's out of the country. And they're like, is this normal? Should I do this? Is this scary for other people? And you want to be transparent about it because that's where they can trust you and be like, yeah, I know this is hard. I know this doesn't make sense, but this is what our process is right now. And just kind of keep those in the back of your mind or keep record of those. And so hopefully you can change the process as you go, but you always want to be transparent about it. And that's what I tell people the most, especially with volunteer panels that I have conducted. The biggest thing is, like, especially for my generation, that we eventually want to be donors, like, you know, whenever they're older or have the time or anything like that, is you got to be honest with them from the beginning, even the struggles, and be like, you know, just be super upfront with that. Another one that has come into play is a call to action with every post, every email, every mailing. And it'll definitely change on your audience, whether it's like give, go, pray, or give, go, whatever. I can't even think of another one. That one has been drilled in my head so much. But you always want to call to action, because otherwise people can read something, but it's unclear what the next step is for them. And so a lot of people won't take that next step. You want to give them the outlet of where to go. You want to give them the direction without actually just being like, do this. And don't be afraid to ask volunteers to do the small stuff, like admin stuff, because if you're needing someone to do that for you, that frees up your time to tackle the bigger projects to even fuel your mission even higher. And so, and if people are coming around and they're consistent, they already believe in what you're doing. And so they're happy to do those things. And more often than not, whenever you're ready to take on more people, or even job-wise bring on more people, those are the people that already know what you're doing and know how your processes work. And so you never know how those relationships can form. So never be afraid to ask someone to do the small stuff, because everybody wants to be a part of something. So I know, very long-winded. I'm trying to get it all into one. Moving on to Daily Bread in San Antonio. With this one, I really had to switch my way of thinking of volunteers can become donors, because they had no volunteer like basis at all. And so I really had to backtrack from their donors and be like, did y'all know that y'all can come out here and help us do this? Like, we really need that. And people love to do that. And so it kind of changed my way of thinking of donors are not untangible, you know, they're not untouchable. You do have to communicate with, like, obviously high level donors in a certain type of way, but people are people regardless. And so it was really able, for me, it connected those dots. And, you know, you really had to think of like, well, who have we been talking to? What has our message been up until now? And what opportunities have we given them before, just so we don't dip into that, maybe it didn't work, stuff like that. So don't be afraid to do it from the other way around, rather than volunteers to donors, do it from donors to volunteer. Let's see. And we come down to Mercy Ships, which is where I'm at now. Like I said, started off as a recruiter, which was really hard. Brian is our current recruiter, and he can speak into that, going from something really honed down to like, hey, we need people to build this house, and it's trying to get, you know, in a local place, going from that to something global is completely different. So it really helped change my approach to being able to sustain the ideas that we've had about volunteering, and eventually either turning them into donors or both. And that was, I wrote down, I was like, the hardest part about that role was learning how to really talk to different audiences with the same message. So your volunteer journey, your donor journey, your corporate journey, they're all different. And that's not really reinventing a wheel, but it is something, I guess, that you have to like really sit down and think of, and see how you can merge them without really, I guess, in the way that you talk to them. So it's just something to be mindful of as you start recruiting for people, whether they're donors or volunteers. So I think that is, yeah, I just wrote more about the cycle and how it fuels it and stuff like that. So does anybody...
yeah, we've got some questions in the chat. Do you want to read those, Sarah? We've got 2 actually, or 3.
We've got a few in here. So can you talk a little bit about motivating volunteers? Brian said that he's happy to chime in on that as well. Yeah. Obviously, some people are intrinsically motivated, especially with something like Mercy Ships.
Yeah.
But with others where volunteers may not be, what has worked with your audiences, and what advice do you have when your volunteers are voluntold, which is something that happens a lot in Rotary. We pull in friends and family to volunteer with us.
Yeah. I'm actually glad that you touched on that, about motivating. So, and I'll let Brian put in any 2 cents that he has. But like I said, we recently conducted a volunteer panel, and, like what we were doing right, what they wanted to see more of, what was our messaging, how was it coming across to the actual audience. And I will tell you that one of the biggest things that we lacked, and that I think a lot of places lacked, is engagement. So let's say we have volunteers, which we have something that's called the talent pool. So they're accepted, but maybe that role is filled for now, or we're just not recruiting for it right now. And so they kind of sit there until we say, hey, we're ready for you, get all of these things done. And obviously that's really hard in life, timing is never right. So the biggest thing that now, given that we're in this pandemic, we've had a lot of time to really revamp engagement. And so you always want to over communicate what you're doing. And so right now, like our ship is in Tenerife, Spain, and we are doing maintenance phase. But if we didn't tell people what we're doing and make it exciting, and then highlight volunteer roles and what they do and what it means for us to be able to have that person, like without this person, we couldn't do these things. And so you always want to overdo that and make stories of it and highlight your volunteers. And like I said, the engagement part is a must, and make it fun. We're doing something, like with our ship, our official announcement is October 6th. And so we're making it's like people kind of know what it is, but we're making it into this huge, like, it's coming soon. What are we doing? We don't know. So to me, that gets people's, we have found that kind of gets people excited, is keeping them up to date. Because if it's like, hey, we need you, and they haven't heard from us in 6 months, they may not care what we're doing, or they may have found a place that is willing to be transparent and talk to them about stuff like that. So Brian, do you have anything about motivating volunteers?
Sure. I'll just expound on my brief time recruiting. So just a quick background, guys. I just started at Mercy Ships about 6 months ago. So Kylie is definitely your go-to for information. Was doing my role before I got here. But I like what you said, though, making it fun. Everybody's motivated by something, right? Why do you wake up in the morning? Why do you do what you do? And I think that can be very individual. It can be very personal. Find out what that is. Try not to just blanket that not everyone's motivated by the same thing. So I think the more you can just dive into what motivates each and every person, I think that's going to go a long way. No one likes to be voluntold. I like whoever said that, what to do. because that'll just have the opposite effect. People will carry it like a chore. So just getting after the heart is just probably my best advice, and just including people as much as possible on what impact that they are having or going to have, either through pictures, videos, things like that, so they can really see like the tangible of what they're going to be doing. Has been my experience.
Yeah, no, and he's right. We actually, in marketing, it's been a really hard, I guess I would say, a year and a half, because we went from knowing that we were one ship and we were literally going to have to double 3,000 applications a year to 7,000. And so we kept telling in HR, whenever I was like in his position, was, hey, like, you have got to highlight what volunteers are doing, because you can highlight our patients all you want and where we are and what we've done in saving lives, but volunteering is changing not only those lives, but it's changing the volunteer life as well. People are giving up their time, and it does impact them. And so we kind of shifted over the last 6 months, because we don't have any patients currently, and we can't show those like transformations. And so we are being like, hey, did you know that we have a photographer on board, and they literally capture every moment that we're doing, like they're at the family houses and stuff like that. And so we really dived into highlighting our volunteers, which is good for recruiting, but it's also good for volunteer morale of like, this person didn't give up their time and their life and their money for so long to not be recognized. Like, that is valuable to say. And so you do need to, I would say, even in the small things, like at Habitat, we would have like volunteer galas, like little things, and like maybe it wasn't super fancy, but it was like the best we could do, and that was like the fun part. You definitely want to recognize them as well. So that's a good question.
And if I could just chip in with one more thing, last year Kylie had earlier this year before COVID, Kylie had a great idea. She actually sent cards to everybody on board. I thought that was a cool personal touch that a lot of people really appreciated. Hey, thanks for your time, with some verses on them, which was cool. So I think it's just like the small things. Like, we just sent a big care package to the people on ship. People on the ship have been like under quarantine for like what, 120 days, 130 days.
I think it's close to
something.
Now.
It's so just like little things like that. People really appreciate.
And it's really, that is, we used to do that at Habitat too. Like, whenever you're that small, your numbers, it's easier to do something like that. And so, like I said earlier, like whether you're a volunteer or whether you're a donor, you're still a person. And so like people appreciate this small personal touch of like, hey, like we had 100 volunteers there and those people remembered my name. Like, that's really cool. And so they want to come back because you feel like family, so.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about what the experience was like for you when COVID hit?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been very interesting, as I'm sure it's an interesting story for everybody. And I think that we have two different takes on that, which I think might be interesting. So in a marketing perspective, we had a whole new audience that wasn't, sometimes depending on what we're marketing for, you're speaking to different audiences, but now we're trying to really bring all of those audiences together. So we went from, like I said, doing patients to being like, oh my gosh, we have a patient maybe for 3 months now. And so what are we going to do at the end of 3 months? And so it's really learning how to like pull stories and make stories and finding stories where we're like, why haven't we been doing this the whole time? So I know I touched base on like the medical capacity building. Well, they're making a lasting impact because we're leaving those nations. And what we found was coming back, this is a little out there, but it's really cool. What we found was, like we planned for like 600 max fac surgeries where we're like removing the goiters, and we come back and there's a need for maybe 6 surgeries. And so we're finding that lasting impact, that's like really hard for us to get a hold on numbers, because it's a whole thing. It's happening, and like we're trying to highlight those doctors who stayed and were participating and learning, like the WHO's the World Health Organization's checklist for surgery, like something that we think is basic, and they take it and they're changing their entire nation. And so we started to be able to realize that we were missing those opportunities. And so it's been interesting, but it's been really nice that we get to explore other aspects of our organization that is changing the world in different ways than we had, and we had no idea, or we didn't know the actual impact that it had. And I'm sure Brian can say his little piece about how recruiting has changed for sure.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Because with COVID, I mean, there's been a lot of silence out there. People don't want to take a risk. It's a risky environment. No one wants to move. I mean, who's going to want to give up their job right now when so many people are being laid off? But reversely, though, it's kind of like the calm before the storm. A lot of people after 6 months here, and according to the Labor and Bureau of Statistics, volunteerism now is actually on the rise. So we've been seeing a lot of people kind of like reprioritizing, okay, what is really most important? What do I really want to do? What are my priorities? And a lot of people are like, I want to give back. This COVID situation has like opened my eyes. So I've been talking to a lot of people lately who are like, you know, they're like getting ready. A lot of people are just getting ready, putting their boots on, and they are going to be open to volunteering. And I think once we get back to Africa and these travel restrictions are lifted, right now, I think the floodgates are just about to open up. So
yeah. I was going to say something and I forgot. Typical. But with that, I think it's brought on a lot of opportunities of like, in the marketing aspect of people are going to start shifting their mindset. So how do we catch their attention before everything starts taking off too fast? And just like with like a resurgence, for people volunteering, we've had, especially whenever it first came out, you know, that we were going to have to pack up and leave Senegal. We didn't finish our surgeries there. We got more donations, especially from our like high level donors, because people do want to be involved. And so it's more about, you know, people are like, well, I don't want to ask because you never know this time. And I'm like, if you're not asking, someone else is. And so if organizations are like, we're not going to ask for volunteers or we're going to wait, then you're already behind, because someone's going to do it first, even though it may feel uncomfortable because it's unprecedented times. If you're not doing it first, someone else is going to be doing it first. And so you want to have the leg up on that. So
I really like
great time to start planting seeds.
I really like everything that you mentioned about highlighting the stories of your volunteers, as well as stories of patients. But I think that that's really helpful information for us because we're just vamping up our social media for our club. Do you have any pointers or tips on social media, especially you being involved in all of that marketing aspect?
I mean, I could talk about it for I guess I don't know. Like I said, it's like you want to keep people engaged at all times, even if it's like right now, you know, like whenever we came out that we had to pack up and leave. It was really hard for all of us, and like that's really something I feel like most people would shy away from saying, but I think it really brings the camaraderie, and people come together because they're like, wow, that does suck. Like, how can we help? And so, yeah, I would just say, like, be honest and post often. Some people are kind of holding back, and but just find those stories. We're going to release, I was telling Brian this earlier, is that in October, we're releasing that I think that y'all would really find. So if y'all want to follow Mercy Ships US on Instagram or Facebook, and how we highlight specific positions that are key positions and essential roles and stuff like that, that would be really cool for you guys to see, and how we keep people engaged that way, and how we take them through like a volunteer journey. So.
Do you mostly use Instagram and Facebook, or are there any other social medias that you get a lot of traffic on?
Yeah, I would say that probably our older generation typically steers towards like LinkedIn. And so we try to keep at least those three pretty consistent. I could say that our Twitter probably needs a lot of help, but at this point, it's more of, it's kind of exploring those options. I mean, we have a Twitter, and we actually, yeah. Well, I was going to say like our thing, but I can't. So our Twitter needs a little help, but I would say that specifically, like Instagram, especially this generation, and then, which is actually really cool. I've been trying to push this on the ship. If you can highlight someone like on your stories and you like follow them throughout their entire volunteer journey experience, I always tell people that if someone can't imagine themselves there, then they're not going to apply. If they can look at a picture and imagine themselves in that scenario, then it's tangible. So you have an easier time of being like, you can do this. It's going to be hard, and the process is hard, maybe, especially right now, we don't know, but we're right here with you, and this is what you'd be doing. And so like, you always want to show and be transparent about the work that they're going to be doing and is expected of them. And that gets more questions. And so you can lead them to a recruiter, or someone to answer those questions for them. So.
Very cool. I have a quick question. What differences do you see across generations with volunteers? Like, are there different motivators? Are there certain generations or certain age groups that volunteer more or take on certain roles versus other age groups?
Yeah. So I think it's different for me, because right now it is different. So and we're a little different because our time commitments, it's almost, I would say, like the Peace Corps, where some of it is like 2 years. Some of our shortest term roles for a non-medical or a non-technical role are 2 to 3 months, which we don't think is that long, but for someone to come and like give up their time and like their job and stuff like that, it is really hard. And so what we're finding is, people in a gap year, because you do have to be 18 to volunteer and all that stuff. Or maybe they just graduated college, and I guess that would be a gap year. I'm like, before they get a job, I just said that. But, or you get people who are retired and who have the time and the resources to go. And so the really heavy hitters, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are people with families who are in the middle of their careers. And so, for instance, we have an academy on board so people can bring their kids and go through school and even graduate. It's accredited. But a lot of people don't know that we offer that because, like, they're in the middle of their life. And so we found it's easier to like plant seeds while they're a little younger. And so like, you want to keep them on the forefront of, if I do have a gap year or if I do have 6 months, I want to go and do this, or at least this is an option for me to do. And then you want to hit them mid-career. So it's like, whenever we retire, we can do this too. And so we're trying to bridge that gap, but it's making, and that's something in October, whenever we release that campaign, is like, hey, did you know in the middle of your career, like, or, you know, if you have some time, you're switching schools, if you're a teacher, like this is available for you and you can bring your family. Whereas at Habitat, it was all over the board. You get your younger ones, people who are just looking to make those hours in school, which you need to take advantage of because every college group has to have so many volunteer hours. So like you want to approach a college and be like, where are these groups? And then, you know, you would have specific sets of groups who would do it all together, and maybe they were an older group that had retired, and they made a weekly thing out of it. And so you can use them for during the week for like admin stuff, and on the weekends on your events, they can partake in those. So I think it really depends on like your size and what you need them for and when you need them, because their aspect of life does matter depending on how much time they're willing to give up.
Makes sense.
So what's the hook? Is that pertaining strictly to mercy ships?
I mean broadly. I think for
Yeah.
mercy ships specifically, obviously with the time commitment and some of those things, it's a little bit more challenging, but just in general.
Yeah. I would say that those people have a calling for volunteering. With mercy ships, you really get the faith-based organization who definitely feel called to do it. And so that's a lot of their hook. The fact that their families can partake in that also is a hook. And I would say on a smaller level, it's tangible enough for them. So like for me, I started reaching out to the Smith County Habitat because I was like, you know, I really don't have a whole lot of time to do stuff like during the week or even after work. What can I do like on the weekends? And so it's really like time related. That doesn't cost them any money, because normally something small like that, they wouldn't have to. It's not like a mission trip, almost like mercy ships. And so they don't have to pay to volunteer. Maybe they have to sign up, but maybe they don't have to pay. Now, if they want to come to like an event that you're doing, you know, like a marathon or something, they can pay to participate, or they can just volunteer to, you know, sign people in or something like that. So you just want to make it more tangible for them to do, even if it's something small. That's something small that you would have time to do something else that might be bigger. So.
Hi, Kylie. I have a question. Okay, so I am involved in a student-run medical clinic here in Dallas, and it's pretty popular amongst the students. So like we always have enough volunteers each week, but because of that and because we only have so many volunteer slots, each student may only volunteer once every 2 to 3 weeks. So it's hard for students to really learn the processes of the clinic and really know how things work. And so have you come across this problem before in other organizations, and how do you cut down the time that's lost to like training new volunteers in like a high turnover type environment?
Yeah, I guess for me, I would be thinking of like for one, like why are there only so many slots? Because if it is like the training aspect, can you have someone that does that consistently, or do those people, can they, it's almost like you want to think of like a tier level of like these slots are taken because these people are consistent. So either you want more time or you want to be able to like boost those numbers. And I know that's hard like right now with regulations on people and such. But I'm just thinking like at Habitat we had because we also did like community service, and so it's like every week trying to like retrain people and all of this stuff. And it was more of like, can these like 3 people do this all the time, and they just get all of these hours training other people on the smaller things. So it's really just kind of segmenting the roles, if that makes any sense. And maybe if I understood it, maybe I can talk to you later, like understand what they're doing and if it's tangible to break it up that way and how you can start to slowly expand that. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for our guests? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kylie and Brian. I think those are really great insights, really great tips. Our club is still pretty new. We're still in our infancy. So, anything that we can learn from the experts on volunteers and fundraising and, anything that can help us grow and serve our communities is much appreciated. So thank you both for coming and sharing with us. Paige, I believe you are still on. Do you have some fun announcements to share?
I do. Thank you. So I was just going to update you guys on our book drive and how we did. So just from everything we were able to track, it looks like we donated at least 262 books. And we got $975 donated to Kids Need to Read. So,
Wow.
you guys. So I'm so excited. So proud of you guys. Also, just to put this out there, only 14 people submitted forms. So if you have not done that, please do it so you can get some service credit. If you're not sure if you did it, just do it again, and that's totally fine. And there was 1 or 2 people that submitted the forms that they didn't include like any number of books or anything like that. So if you think that could have been you, go ahead and let me know how many books you did. And yeah. So
Awesome.
Good job, you guys.
That is incredible. So we blew our goal of 150 books out of the water. And like I mentioned earlier, we did not have any sort of monetary goal. And Paige, did you say that we were close to $1,000 donated?
Yep, 975.
Guys, that is crazy. I am so freaking proud of us. Super, super excited about that. And that is going to be posted on our social media because we are going to brag on ourselves for that one and share that with the district. Our district clubs, our fellow clubs in the district are trying to figure out how to do this whole virtual thing. And a lot of them are lost at ideas for virtual service projects and, if they can do that. So I hope that us sharing this will encourage all of them to go out and do some virtual projects as well. I am super stoked on that. So great job. Thank you to everyone who donated and contributed and helped and shared all over social media and texted friends and family. Everyone was a huge part of this. So thank you all for that. Again, submit that form if you haven't. I haven't. So I'll make sure I get mine in. All of my books were donated through Amazon, so they were counted, but I'll get my form in. So everyone do that as well. Do we have any other announcements, any other questions, comments, concerns from anyone? Going once, going twice. Okay. I am not going to pull up the 4-way test. I am going to trust you all to have started memorizing it, or I'm going to give you about 30 seconds as I continue to talk to Google it. So you can bring that up if you just Google 4-way test Rotary, in case you haven't memorized it, which I know you all have, of course. To close out our meeting, the 4-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. Number 1.
First, is it
Truth.
Second, is it fair?
Concerned.
3. And number 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Awesome. Thanks, guys. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you back here next week. Thanks again, Kylie and Brian.
Thanks, guys.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Adios.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
And yes, I know I owe you a video, Sarah. I'll get it to you.